Say a warm welcome to everybody. Good to have you with us there in Pitt Meadows. I had a great time being with you guys last week. What a time we had. There in Commercial, great to have you with us in both the services. Strathcona, I heard you had an amazing Sunday with Sam Ward last week. What a day that was. And looking forward to what's going to happen there at our Strathcona campus as we work with Eden. And of course, if you're watching online, thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Wherever you are around the world, you are part of our family. And make sure you engage online in the discussions. Glad to have you with us. And then those of you that are watching on Saturday night, this is maybe a first, but glad to have you with us today here at our Saturday night service. We are moving into a series about Christmas. Our theme for the month of December is Christmas Is. And then every week we'll take another aspect of that. We're going to work around Advent. It's a word that's commonly used during Christmas time. If you're new to church, it might be kind of a new word to you, even though you would have probably seen it or heard of it through the different Advent calendars. I received an Advent calendar this week, and it looks like this on the outside. Came from our friends at Jelly Digital Marketing. And the way the Advent calendar works is you open it up and you see all these little different boxes. And this particular Advent calendar will have different types of jam or honey inside of it. So that's an Advent calendar. And today you can get Advent calendars for just about everything. Everything from diamonds and gold inside of every little box to chocolates to apparently there's even an Advent calendar with marijuana in it. So I don't know. There's lots of different kinds of Advent calendars. However, the original purpose of the Advent calendar comes from Germany, from our Lutheran friends, and they developed the Advent calendar as a way to help people really think about what Christmas is about. And it was a way of waiting for Christmas. So Advent is a Latin word which means arrival or coming. And so as we look at Advent, we're going to be thinking about Christmas and what is to come. Advent really means waiting for Christmas, getting our minds on what God did for us. At Christmas time, there's a lot of other things that can be on our mind other than what Christ did for us. So hopefully, Advent helps us to keep the main thing the main thing. Today we're going to talk about Christmas is hope and what we're hoping for at Christmas time. I might ask the question at our different campuses, if you're watching online, what do you hope for this Christmas? What do you hope to get at Christmas time? For some of us, we have a certain gift that we're hoping to get, or maybe you have children that made a Christmas wish list for you. I know that we, especially earlier on, we would get those from our children, a list of things that they were hoping to get at Christmas time, or maybe Christmas is just hoping that people like your gifts. That's something that we hope for after all the shopping. When you see the present open, just, I hope they really like that. Or maybe we're hoping for whatever our family tradition is, that they'll really enjoy it. Sometimes we're hoping for maybe our favorite song to be sung somewhere, Silent Night or whatever your favorite song might be. Maybe we're just hoping that we don't have to work over Christmas, or we're hoping that we don't have to be lonely, or a loved one wouldn't be lonely. So there's different things that we hope for at Christmas. And this message today is all about hope and about some people that were hoping for a long time. Christmas is a reminder. It's there in your notes. If you have your notes, you can get those out, or if you have the app, you can open it up there. But Christmas is a reminder that your hope in God is not misplaced. Of all the things you're hoping for, hope in God. We're going to look at a couple in the story of Luke's account of the gospel named Zacharias and Elizabeth. So if you have your notes, you can go there. If you have your Bible, turn to Luke chapter 1, and we'll get into that story about Zachariah and Elizabeth. Some of the things that we can learn from them is, one, that God has made promises that affect all of us. Everybody in the world has been affected by the promises that God's made for us. And these go way, way, way back 2,000 years before Zachariah and Elizabeth were there. There was a promise made by God to Abraham. See, the Christmas story starts before a couple getting pregnant with a baby. This is before Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus. Before that, the Christmas story was already in motion. That's why Luke picks it up with Zachariah and Elizabeth. So, in your notes, I have Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. God had said to Abraham, he was living in what was called the Ur of the Chaldees, the Middle East. He said, I'm going to ask you to leave your family. I'm going to ask you to leave your tribe. And I'm not telling you where I'm taking you. You just have to trust me, but you're going to go to another place. Which was a huge thing for Abraham to do. A different era, a different time for him to leave and go to a country that he didn't know anything about. But he follows God in sheer faith, and he heads out. And then God says to him in chapter 12, verse 2 and 3, he says, I will make you a great nation. I will make you a great nation. He might have even laughed a bit at this point because he's got no kids. And God was saying, I'll make you a great nation. You know, he might have said, hey, just to be a dad would be great, or to be a grandpa, or even a great-grandpa, that would be amazing. But to make me a great nation, okay. He says, I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. Now, at this point, it could be really easy for him to say, really? You're going to do that to me? Because look where I am. I'm being taken away from all that I have to a land I don't know, and I'm going to have significance. How is this going to work? But he trusts God. He says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you. Wow, all the families. And I don't even have any kids yet, but this was the promise. Now, this is a different time. This is a different era. There's a lot of violence in the world at that time. Nations weren't blessing other nations. Tribes weren't blessing other tribes. They were conquering them, not blessing them. So this is a really radical statement that God gives to Abram, that he would be blessing people through him. And no doubt Abram wondered, how was that going to happen? And if you know a little bit of the history of the Bible, eventually, through Abraham's dysfunctional family, and it's pretty dysfunctional, Abraham's family, but eventually Joseph comes on the scene. That tribe turns into a nation in Egypt. It doesn't look like they're blessing a lot of people. It doesn't really look like they're a kingdom, but they emerge from there through Moses. They go into a land. They become a kingdom. David shows up on the scene, then Solomon. At that point, it looks like they may be able to start blessing other nations, but then they start worshiping other gods. They get taken into captivity, and it looks like any chance of this nation, someone coming from this nation being a blessing according to this promise to Abraham, is very, very obscure. And then during the part of the darkest times, there was a prophet Isaiah, there was a prophet Malachi, and they would remind the people that there's something coming, there's something on the horizon, and keeping their hopes alive. In Malachi chapter 1, verse 11, we read, from the rising of the sun even to its going down, my name shall be great among the Gentiles. Among the Gentiles. That's most of us, among the Gentiles, in every place. Incense shall be offered to my name, and a pure offering. For my name shall be great among the nations, says the Lord of hosts. At this point, one of the darkest times of the history of Israel, they could be saying, really? God, your name's great? Maybe Alexander the Great will have a great name, or Zeus might have a great name, but your name's not so great. There came this long period where it seemed like God was silent and inactive. In the middle of that, we have, or I should say the end of that, we have Zacharias and Elizabeth, and they are believing this promise of Abraham. Later on in Luke chapter 1, verse 73, when Zacharias would prophesy, he said, the oath which he swore to our father Abraham. So here was Zacharias and Elizabeth. They didn't stop believing the promise that was given through Abraham 2,000 years before they came on the scene. They continued to believe the promise. Now that promise was not just for them, but the promise that God gave to Abraham, it was actually for us. If you go to Galatians 3:29, it reads, and now that you belong to Christ, you are the true children of Abraham. You are his heirs, and now all the promises God gave to him belong to you. Wow, what an incredible promise. It came through Christ. So that's the first thing we learn from Zacharias and Elizabeth, that God has made a promise that affects all of us, and they were patiently waiting for that. Luke gives us this narrative. The second point we pick up is that God honors those who live righteous, even though God may seem to be inactive. They were so faithful. We pick up the story in Luke chapter 1 and verse number 5. In the days of Herod, the king of Judah, a certain priest named Zacharias, the division of Abijah, his wife was the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. So Zach and Liz, that's their names. They're basically preachers' kids. Their whole lineage was that of priests. And so they kind of grew up in church, so to speak, and they knew the routine. But they were faithful, and they continued, as the Bible says, they were actually blameless. We read in verse 6 and 7, they were both righteous, both of them, Zacharias and Elizabeth, before God, walking on all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord, blameless. So, I mean, these two, they're living it out. And even though they haven't seen God really move for hundreds of years, God was silent for a long period, hundreds of years, but they kept believing the promise. God honors those who continue to trust Him, believe Him, even though they don't see any signs of God at work. And at some point in our Christian life, it seems like God is distant. If you haven't yet experienced that, at some point, you're going to experience like, where is God? And we sometimes ask, maybe even today you're asking this question, why am I doing this? Like, none of my friends are following God. My family used to follow God. I don't know anybody in my school that's following God. Why am I doing this? Why don't I just take the money? Why don't I just move in with my girlfriend or boyfriend like everybody else does? Why am I bothering to live righteous? Is it making any difference? Where is this going to take me? What am I going to get out of this? There's days you just feel like, is this worth continuing to live right before God? But Zacharias and Elizabeth are examples of people that they believed and trust God despite what they saw. You know, Christmas, it's really about a reminder that your hope in God is not misplaced. Because it could look like for Zach and Elizabeth, like, why do you guys continue to believe this? Look at the next verse. Go back to Luke chapter 1 and verse 7. They were righteous, they were blameless, but they had no child. They're living right. They're trusting God, but they have no child because Elizabeth was barren. They were both well advanced in years. Later on, Elizabeth would say, she's thankful when she conceives because she says, now my shame and my reproach is lifted. In their day, it was the woman's fault if she couldn't bear children all the time. And there was such pressure on them. And she had lived with shame that she didn't have any children. And so it would have been very easy for people to come along and say to them, you guys, Zach, Liz, you guys, it's been hundreds of years. I know Abraham made this promise, but maybe the thing's just a myth. I know there's supposed to be a Messiah coming, but you know what? After all, it's been a long time. Maybe it's just a myth. This Messiah, this Advent, this hope for the nations. You guys are old. Why don't you just enjoy the rest of your life? Every morning, you get up, you serve God, you go to bed, you serve God, and you continue to be so faithful. Why don't you just let it go? Come on. But they remained faithful. And they could have somebody said to them, if your God's so good, how come you don't have a child yet? But they remain faithful. They remain blameless. God honors that persistent faith. He honors those who live righteous. Even though there had been nothing for all those years. They were waiting on this promise that God had given to Abraham thousands of years earlier. And God wants us to be faithful, to serve Him, even if we don't see the answers right away. We're in Advent. We're waiting. We're celebrating. We're looking forward. We're remembering that period in history where they waited for Christ to come. It's a time to reflect. In our Christmas season, Christmas is about hope. Another thing we can learn from them is that God will fill his word at the appointed time. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 4, there's a great verse for all of us. But when the right time came, sometimes we wish that we could kind of just take out our calendar and say, God, I asked you for this certain prayer request, and just looking through my calendar here, if we could do that Friday morning, that would be the very best. But it's not according to our timetable. It's according to God's timetable. At the right time, another translation says, at the appointed time, God sent his son, who was born of a woman. So at the right time, he came. God fulfilled his word at the right time. As we read on in the story, Zacharias was chosen to go into the temple and to burn the incense into the holies of holies. And it was a very sacred thing that he was allowed to do. And they did this at that time by casting lots. And he was picked that time. A great honor to do that. So he goes into the temple. The people are on the outside praying. And when he's in there, in verse 11, it says, then an angel of the Lord appeared to him standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zacharias saw him, it says that, it's there in your notes, when saw him, he was troubled and fear fell upon him. But the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zacharias, your prayer is heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will name him John. Now, it's interesting, when Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. Now, that, my friend, is a normal response of seeing an angel. Why? Because they've come out of the presence of God. The Shekinah glory of God, the strength of God. It's so powerful. And they see this angel. He fell down and he just began to worship. Even John, who wrote the book of John, who wrote the book of Revelation, when you read the book of Revelation, when he saw the angel, he fell down and began to worship the angel. It's such a powerful presence of God when they've come from that. If you've ever met somebody, they said, I saw an angel there, and we chatted, or I saw an angel there, and they chatted. They didn't see a Bible angel, because in the Bible, when they saw an angel, they were just like, they just fell down and worshiped. There's such a strong presence of God. And the angels will say, don't worship me. You have to worship Christ. And he falls down in reverence before this angel. And the angel begins to speak to him and says, don't be afraid. That's kind of the standard response of the angels. Don't be afraid. Your prayer's heard. That's encouraging. If nothing else, just to know God heard my prayer. Maybe you're watching today or you're listening today, and just to know God's listening. He's hearing your prayers. And obviously, they had been praying for a child, and they said, hey, you're going to have a child. He's going to be a son, and you're going to call him John. Not Zacharias. You're going to call him John. So this is the news that's brought to them. He was a blameless man, and he gets this news. Just thinking about that, here's Zacharias. He's lived right. He's lived blameless, but he falls down in reverence. And just, okay, I don't know about this. Can you imagine if he came into your presence? Here's Zacharias, and he's blameless, and he's, oh, no, I don't know about this, but what about us? I think if an angel visited me like that, I'd be like, okay, what is it? What do I have to share with you? Our lives are so earth, and we're so finite. We would be just trembling. What is it? You see how inadequate I am. And here's a man who lived right and blameless, and yet he trembled in the presence of this angel who came to visit him. He was in this place doing the sacrifice when the angel visited. They're waiting on the outside for him. And when he comes out, they're surprised at what he has to say. In verse 18, we'll pick it up there. Zechariah had said to the angel, how shall I know this? That's an interesting response. He's been praying for a long time. How shall I know this? For I'm an old man, and my wife is well advanced in years. Now, I don't know if you noticed that, guys, but you can just look at his response here. I'm an old man, and my wife, he doesn't say my wife is old. He just says, and my wife is well advanced in years. So he's very, very diplomatic about the way he says that. He says, and the angel answered and said to him, I love what Gabriel says here. He says, I don't know if how could this be? He's been praying all these years. He's been believing God. And now, at this moment, he says, I don't know, how could this be? And the angel answered and said to him, I'm Gabriel. Hey, dude, I'm Gabriel. You know who I am? And I stand in the presence of God. I'm right there in the throne room, and I was sent to speak to you and bring you these glad tidings. Wow. But he goes on to say, behold, you will be mute and not able to speak until the day these things take place. Why? Because you did not believe my words, which shall be fulfilled in their own time. Again, God fulfills his word in their own time. Interesting what happens to Zacharias, isn't it? And what does the angel do? The angel does something different. Despite his years of praying, Zacharias was having a hard time believing the angel. As a result, the angel would silence his voice until his son John was born. Judson Cornwall had a very interesting observation on this. He said, unbelief in the head cannot get into the heart if it doesn't come out of his mouth. And Judson Cornwall's take on this is, God had to zip his lip until John was born so that he wouldn't have a bunch of negative words. Oh, I don't know if this is going to happen. He had to keep him silent until the baby was born. And you could read later on in the chapter, when the baby's born, they say, well, you should name him Zacharias. And Elizabeth says, no, he's not going to be called Zacharias. He's going to be called Elizabeth. They looked over at John, and John over at Zacharias, is he going to be called John? He goes, yes. He writes it on a tablet. He's going to be called John. And when he writes it, he can speak again. It's as if God kept him quiet until the appointed time so that could take place. So the third thing that I want to give you there was, first of all, again, just review. Number one, God has made a promise that affects everybody, every nation, every tongue, every tribe has been blessed through this promise which led to Jesus, the Messiah, the Advent, what they were waiting for, the first Advent. Then secondly, God honors those who live righteous, even though God may seem to be inactive. And then thirdly, God will fulfill his word at the appointed time. At this time, I'm going to invite our campus pastors to come on up, and they're going to close off with this last point and share a few more thoughts with you. And then I want to just continue for those that are watching online, give you a couple other points around this message. There's a hymn that we sing at Christmas time called O Holy Night. You'll recognize the words, written by a French poet, and the history behind this song is quite interesting. How he wrote it and where he wrote it, his occupation. That's for another time. But let me go to a couple of the lyrics in this song. Here it says, it's in your notes, long lay the world in sin and error pining. We don't use that word pining much, but it's this longing, this waiting. They're waiting for this first advent, the first coming of Christ. They're waiting, they're longing, and here are these faithful people, Zacharias and Elizabeth, waiting for this time. In a culture, many of them had walked away. They had been adopted the Greek culture, the Roman culture. Many had walked away, but they had stayed faithful, waiting and waiting for the time of Jesus. It says, long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. Then I love this next one. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices. A weary soul rejoices. A thrill of hope. Christmas is hope. There was this hope that the Messiah would come. There was this hope that the promise given to Abraham would happen. For yonder breaks new and glorious morn. Christmas is about hope. The whole thing was about hope. As we go through Advent, easy to get caught up in all the activity of Christmas. But we can learn from our Orthodox Christian family that during this season, we need to put aside some of the other distractions and remember that first Christmas was a fulfillment of an amazing promise. Do you know in the Bible that there are literally hundreds of prophecies about that first Advent? There are 300 prophecies of the first Advent, the first coming of Christ, and they waited for that. Now, I want you to know that there's also, the fourth point is simply this, that we have the hope of a second Advent. The second Advent is the second coming of Christ. And just like in that day, many people were saying, it's just a myth, I think, Yeah, Abram had this promise, but look what's happened. The nation's come and gone, and now we're oppressed by the Romans. How are we ever going to be a blessing? Today, you look at Israel, what an amazing blessing that nation is to the rest of the world. What's come out of there? Truly, God's name is great. Wherever there is worship, people are lifting up the name of Jesus. It came to pass. And now there's a second coming. There's a second coming of our Lord. And Christmas should remind us about a second advent. Jesus, when he left the two ordinances for the church, one was baptism, one was communion, they were all around his death and resurrection, not his birth. It was really helping us to understand what he did for us and what was on the horizon. Do you remember when we take communion? He said, "This do in remembrance of me until I come again." When Jesus was lifted up in Acts chapter 1, the angels said from heaven, the same way, they said, "Why are you guys looking up into heaven?" The same way he was taken up is the same way he'll come back again. They might have thought Zacharias and Elizabeth were, come on, you guys, it's over, it's done, it's not happening, it's a myth. And today there are those who would say the second coming of Christ is a myth. We've been hearing that for hundreds of years. Where is he? They had been hearing for hundreds of years, where's the first coming? The second coming of Christ will happen. It is on the horizon. There's so many signs that point to his imminent return. There are, as I mentioned, over 500 prophecies of the second coming, the second advent of Jesus. 1 Corinthians 11:26 is the one I mentioned where he talks about it in the Lord's Supper. Paul says, "For as often as you eat this bread and you drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes." Every time we take communion, we're proclaiming the second advent, the second coming of Christ. So Christmas is hope. Luke gives us his first story. The first act in his account reminds us of what God did years ago through Abraham, the coming of the Messiah, and how we would be grafted into this as Gentiles and the amazing hope that we have ahead of us. So my challenge for you today is, do we keep believing? Do you keep standing in hope, or are you quitting? Are you giving in to the world around you, or are you standing firm, trusting God? Are you making that choice, like Zacharias and like Elizabeth, to be faithful, to walk before him? Even though you may not see God answering a prayer right away, are you staying faithful to him? As I said right at the very beginning, Christmas is a reminder that your hope in God is not misplaced. I want to ask you today, do you have that personal walk with God? For those of you watching online, may this be a time where your heart's just awakened that you were included in that plan. Those promises were for you. It simply has to be received. Like any gift, if I was to give you this gift and I was to hand it over to you, I can give it to you, but that gift has to be received for the transaction to be complete. And God gave us a gift. He gave us a gift of salvation. And that gift has to be received. You say, "Well, how would I receive it?" We simply receive it by praying out of our hearts, saying, "God, I receive what you did for me when you sent Christ, that first advent. Then he died and rose again that I could have life." Today, I'm wondering whether or not you take a bold step of faith and pray with us and say, "Lord, come into my life. I accept what you did for me." There is hope like in none other than our Lord Jesus Christ. So, if you're watching with us online, join me in prayer. Just pray along with me. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, today I receive your gift. I receive the life of Christ. I receive his forgiveness. I accept what he did for me when he died and rose again, that I could have a new life. And today I look forward to the second advent, to his coming again. In Jesus' name, amen. So if you prayed that with us, congratulations. And just stay with us for a little longer. If you're watching online, you can connect there through a chat, or even just click, "I prayed that prayer. I committed my life to Christ today." Take a moment to do that. Christmas is about hope, the greatest hope of all. Look forward to seeing you next week as we continue the series.